Hello, this is Skylit Lake reading Deku Sensei by Bloomabill. Chapter 3 Misery Loves Company. Emotionally exhausted and physically tired, Izuku fell asleep rather quickly after their conversation. Inko stepped out to let him sleep, as she got to work moving outside to make the phone calls she needed to. The first was to her boss, explaining that she was taking some of her hard-earned time off for her family matter. She called the Board of Education next, but given the time of night, she didn't get anything but an answering machine. Inko left a strongly worded message that she wanted a meeting with them about her son's treatment in some of their schools. Her third call was to a small firm that helped with cases involving minorities. She had memorized their number once Izuku turned 6 and still hadn't shown signs of a quirk. The fourth call was one she spent an hour arguing with herself whether or not to even make. Inka's brain flooded with things she wanted to say, things she wished to scream into the phone, regardless of who might hear her. But Inko didn't do any of that, and did her best to quiet the hateful part of herself, then, with a shaky breath, pressed the call button. Inko waited for a bated breath for the other to pick up and tried to think of what to say, if they did pick up. The quiet click before a tired voice answered was rather underwhelming, considering her mental anguish. "Inky, what the fuck are you doing calling me in the middle of the goddamn night? It's about 2 in the fucking morning." Inko, upon hearing Mitzi's gravelly and slurred voice, couldn't help tear up. The weight of the situation finally allowed to start sinking in, now that her son couldn't see her breaking down. "Inky," Mitsuki quietly repeated, concerned, and much more awake from not getting an answer. I'm sorry, Mitsu-chan. I didn't mean to wake you up," she apologized, voice shaking, all of her anger suddenly and quickly being disconnected from her friend. Hey, don't go spouting off BS like... Don't go spouting off BS, it's fine, Inky. What's going on? Mitsuki assured, and Inko had to hold herself back from sobbing. "Izuku came home bleeding today. We're at the hospital right now," she managed to say as she wiped away tears. "Fucking God, Inko! What the hell? Is the little guy okay? I'm getting dressed right the fuck now!" Mitsuki panickingly questioned with the sound of fabric moving around in the background. Inko swallowed thickly. He's going to stay in the hospital for a while. He's going to need a lot of treatment," she answered. "Don't worry about crap, Inky. I'm on my way. Where the fuck are you? I'm meeting you at the goddamn hospital," Mitsuki demanded. Before Inko could get herself together, there was some muttering on the other side of the phone. Judging from Mitsuki's yelling, Inko guessed Mitsu-chan had managed to wake up Masaru. When Mitsuki stopped, Inko rattled off the hospital's address. "K, got it. I'll be there soon. Don't you worry about shit until I get there, Inky." Mitsuki promised, then quickly hung up before Inko could get another word in edgewise. Anxiety began to eat at her, not moments later, and Inko went to the cafeteria to get a cup of tea to help calm her nerves. As she waited for the blonde in the lobby, Inko was fairly worried Mitsuki might have broken a few laws when she stormed into the hospital. Not even half an hour later, the blonde was also clearly panicked and was a bit of a mess. Her clothes having just been thrown on and having done nothing about her bedhead. Frantic red eyes met teary green ones across the room, and Mitsuki clearly didn't give a damn about social decency as she ran over to her. "Inko!" she cried, crushing the greenette in a bone-crushing hug. "What the hell happened? Does he need surgery? Can we see little Izu?" Mitsuki questioned as soon as she pulled away with her hands on Inko's shoulder. Inko sniffled and rubbed away some of her tears. He fell asleep before I called Mitsu-chan, but we can see him if we're quiet," Inko answered, pointedly ignoring the other question. Mitsuki had thankfully jumped at the offer and followed Inko up to Izuku's room. The blonde didn't make it 2 steps in before her hands flew up to cup her gaping mouth. As she stared at the black and blue boy, utterly horrified, while most of Izuku was covered up with his arms by a blanket, his neck was exposed, allowing anyone to see the hand-shaped bruise that wrapped around it, as well as part of one of the burns. In addition to multiple cuts, along with other bruises on his arms, as he laid limp on the hospital cot, with a nose cannula and other devices connected to him. Thinking her friend had more than enough of a look, Inko led Mitsuki away from her battered son's room and to a table in a corner at the cafeteria. They were almost there when Mitsuki's shock and horror dissolved into blind rage, with steam practically pouring from her ears. Those bastards! How can anyone do that to Izuku? He's a sweet-ass brat that wouldn't hurt a fly. A fucking fly! Who would dare lay a fucking hand on him? Mitsuki yelled, finally exploding when they were inside the room. Threats and strings of curses spilled from Mitsuki's mouth with little regard for those around them. As Inko tried to corral her to a table away from prying ears, almost there, Mitsuki rounded on Inko. "Has he told you who those fuckers are? I don't care who those motherfuckers are. Motherfuckers think they are. I've got lawyers, Inko," Mitsuki exclaimed loudly, and clearly ready to go for blood. The dreaded question that Inko had been afraid of since Mitsuki arrived made her hesitate in her steps. "Mitsu-chan, please sit down," Inko requested softly, tugging Mitsuki towards the table. "I swear, when I get on my hands on them, Inko..." Mitsuki began to rant again, but Inko cut her off. "Mitsuki, sit down," she told the blonde more sternly. The blonde's mouth shut, and she sat down, looking at Inko a little startled. Inko took a seat next to her and let out a ragged sigh. "Izuku told me who did it," she told her meekly, already resigned to the painful conversation. Mitsuki jumped on the statement near immediately. "Who?" she demanded, practically spitting the word. Inko grimaced. It was his classmate," Inko answered. Mitsuki's mouth dropped open. "What? Katsuki didn't say shit. There's no way he'd let them get away with that crap. Mitsuki exclaimed, looking baffled, and Inko's eyes focused on her empty cup of tea. He wouldn't, right? Mitsuki asked, losing a lot of her confidence. When Inko hadn't said anything. Katsuki is the ringleader of the main bullies, Inko finally told her, causing Mitsuki to gasp. Her jaw dropped, and she automatically went into denial. There's no way that little shit would hurt Izu. Sure, they had their fights, and the brat gives me shit whenever I ask about school, and Izuku hasn't come over in years, but that doesn't mean I would have. Oh God, Slowly, Mitsuki's words lost their confidence. Inko grimly watched as things began to click in her friend's head, tears welling up as she slumped back into her seat as the reality of her son's fractured relationship fully sunk in. I'm a horrible parent. How could I have missed that? Mitsuki whispered, tears falling, hair clutched tightly in her hands. Inko couldn't stop a mirthless laugh falling from her lips. If you're a horrible parent, I must be so bad at parenting I shouldn't be called a parent, Miss-chan. She said. Bullshit, the fuck you are! Mitsuki protested immediately, but Inko leveled her a look. I'm a nurse, and I didn't notice my son coming home bleeding and blown up. I think that's a bit worse, Mitsu-chan. Inko countered with a forced, wobbly smile, tears pouring down her face again as her body trembled. The two sat silently, unable to find the words as they cried over their sons. What's wrong with Izuku? Mitsuki asked once she regained her voice. Inko wilted and started picking at the rim of her empty cup. He's got a lot of cuts and bruises, like you saw. Cracked ribs, a bacterial infection, maybe sepsis, symptoms of nitroglycerin poisoning, but we're most concerned about the TBI. Inko listed off, straying away from using the bigger, scarier terms. But Mitsuki didn't look any less horrified or guilty. The fuck is a TBI? Mitsuki asked, a voice quieter than Inko had heard a friend in years. It stands for traumatic brain injury. It's from primary blast damage, Inko explained, a bit disconnected from the conversation. Katsuki used his fucking quirk on Izuku? Mitsuki questioned, face pale, and Inko grimly nodded. That's where he got the burns and nitroglycerin poisoning, Mitsu-chan, she confirmed. Mitsuki's shoulders slumped as she had strings keeping them up, and that she had been cut. How could this crap happen, Inko? Is little Izuku going to be okay? Mitsuki questioned, running a hand through her hair, trying to find something to reassure her frayed nerves. The hospital is going to keep him for at least 2 weeks to treat and monitor him in case of further complications. Once he's released, Izuku will have to do months of rehabilitation therapy and regular therapy for the bullying, Inko explained, rubbing the back of her hand. I'm not sure if we can pay for it, Inko muttered, still trying to figure out how to keep in the black while paying for the treatments, medicine, and therapy. I'll pay for it, Mitsuki said, catching Inko off guard. What? Inko questioned, turning to look at the blonde. My bastard child is the reason Izuku is in the hospital. The least I can do is make sure he gets proper treatment after all the bullshit the brat has put him through. Mitsuki clarified face having regained some of its color and glaring at her hands on the table. Mitsu-chan, you don't have to... Inko tried to argue. No, Inko, I'm going to pay for all of it. The hospital bills, prescriptions, rehabilitation sessions, all of it, Inko. Mitsuki firmly told the brunette, then sighed, rubbing her forehead. Besides, whatever bloodthirsty lawyer you get is probably going to ask for it anyway, when you fucking start suing, she added offhandedly, and Inko's grip on the cup got tighter. Izuku doesn't want to sue anyone, Inko corrected, much to the blonde's shock. The fuck? Why the hell not? Those little gremlins, my brat, put him in the godforsaken hospital, and God knows what the fuck else. Mitsuki questioned a small bit of outrage, fueling her tone. Inko gave another wobbly smile and a breathless laugh. He doesn't want to ruin anyone's future. He doesn't want to be the reason they couldn't achieve their dreams, she explained. That's bullshit. Are you really not going to charge their sorry asses, Inko? Mitsuki asked, personal scorn of the situation causing her to be protective over her beloved godson. Inko wanted to say she was, but she'd hang them by their ears. But just let her head hang instead. No, Mitsu-chan, it simply wouldn't be worth the legal fees, Inko glumly answered. Fuck that! I told you I've got lawyers, Inko. If money is a problem, I'll fucking pay to see those shitheads behind bars, Mitsuki offered, and Inko sighed. Mitsu-chan, I wish it was that simple, but the money isn't the problem, she told her, tears welling up again. What happens after the lawsuit? Izuku could never walk down the street without everyone knowing he's quirkless, without everyone knowing what happened to him. It was so hard trying to find a school that would take him in as it is. But if we went to court, they would never take him in with a lawsuit on his record. He'd be turned away because they would be afraid of a lawsuit against them. People already turn him away for just being quirkless, because they don't want to deal with him getting hurt under their care. Inko broke down with sobs midway through her rant. Mitsuki pulled her into a hug and tried to comfort her dear friend, even though there wasn't much the blonde could do for the brunette. I'm sorry, Inky, I don't know what to do, Mitsuki confessed, emotionally torn. Inko sighed shakily as she wiped her face. I don't either, Miss Chan, but Izuku can't go back. He can't go back to that place, Inko said, with her body shaking from nerves and anger. I don't know where we can find a new school. Aldera was the only school in the district that would take him and not deny us tuition, Inko continued, venting, a bit unintentionally. Don't they offer online courses for dumbasses that can't go into school buildings? Maybe little Izu can do one of those shitty scams, Mitsuki suggested, and for a minute, Inko paused, then smiled brilliantly. That's it! Oh, Mitsu-chan, it's a perfect idea! She exclaimed, hugging the blonde. Inko immediately took out her phone and started to look up online schools, mumbling, of different things she wanted and how legitimate they might be. I'm going to go back home to tell Masa the fuck's going on. I didn't tell him much before I ran out. Do you want me to swing by your rat hole to get you guys anything? Like clothes or some shit? Mitsuki offered, pulling out a handkerchief to wipe away her tears. Inko blinked, then her mouth opened in an O shape. I rushed to the hospital because of Izuku's condition. I wasn't gonna grab anything but a change of clothes for Izuku, Inko confessed, a little ashamed. Right. Don't worry your little bobblehead about anything, Inky. I'll take care of this crap, Mitsuki promised, standing up. Inko was quick to jump to her feet and hugged Mitsuki tightly. Thank you for coming, Mitsu-chan, Inko muttered quietly. The entire situation had been emotionally taxing, and she truly needed the comfort of her closest friend. Of course I would, you inky little bitch, Mitsuki replied automatically, aggressively hugging her back, and Inko began bawling. You've been so good to us, Mitsu-chan, she exclaimed, burying her face into Mitsuki's side. Mitsuki would normally brush the praise off with a smirk, but after everything she learned tonight, she felt more guilty hearing the words instead of the pride. It's nothing, Inky. See you in an hour or two, Mitsuki muttered, patting Inko down, then left with Inko seeing her out, before then returning to Izuku's room and continuing her research of online schools. Chapter 4. Hard Conversations. Mitsuki's grip on the steering wheel caused her knuckles to turn white, and she was trying her best to not pull over the car and snap at the asshole behind her that kept honking like the fucking bastard that he was. Mitsuki was never any good at dealing with emotions, and she was never going to claim otherwise. So learning the truth of her son's behavior towards little Izu was much worse than a punch to the gut. And she had never felt so torn emotionally and mentally. Katsuki was her hard-working little brat, who had a massive ego despite her best efforts, but she'd always loved him as any decent mother would. But here she was coming home at 3 in the morning from visiting some of the most important people to her, and one of them was in the hospital with the other crying at his bedside because of him. Mitsuki wasn't sure if there were enough words to describe her emotions right now, and she was only really able to pick out the biggest ones bubbling to the surface when it came to her son's actions. Sorrow that she had become so disconnected from the people she loved that her son could do such awful things right under her nose without knowing. Horrified that her son would hurt anyone like that, or use his quirk on anyone, much less Izuku. Confused on how the boy who always proclaimed he'd be the number one hero could become a ringleader of bullies. And so incredibly disappointed that her brat had sunk so low, the most familiar was probably the anger that her brat would ever raise a single hand to hurt anyone, much less repeatedly attacking little Izu. Guilt had begun eating away at her in the hospital once Inko told her Katsuki was the one to put Izuku in the hospital, and she hardly looked Inko in the eyes afterwards Tears pricked Mitsuki's eyes at the thought of what the Midoriyas would have to go through. Anger swelled and crawled under her skin, creeping all over her body, making her physically shake when she remembered that the brats that hurt Izuku would get off scot-free without even getting a damn slap on the wrist for those cocksuckers. But knowing what she knew now, other thoughts began to plague Mitsuki's mind. Izuku was such a sweet, open brat, happy to speak his mind to anyone that would listen, that grew into more of an anxious wallflower nerd like Inko. She assumed that Izuku was becoming more like his mother, since she was the only one taking care of him. God knows Katsuki was a splitting image of herself. But how much did she actually know about her sweet-ass little godson? Was she really as much of an introvert as Inko? Or had he purposely closed himself off from people because he was afraid to open up to anyone anymore? Did he have anxiety like his mum, or was he justifiably paranoid that her son would beat him black and blue for moving even a hair out of place? Was Izuku really shy, or was he terrified that everyone would turn on him the second he opened his mouth? These thoughts made Mitsuki's guts twist in a way they hadn't since middle school, as every interaction was dragged back through her mind in vivid detail, with every possible red flag being tauntingly waved in her face. She bit her lip, unable to stop herself from comparing her own behavior to Izuku's, and unable to keep from cursing herself out for not seeing it earlier. Mitsuki had tried to calm herself down on the ride back to her apartment, but she still found herself trembling as she got out of her car. Masaru was already waiting anxiously for her in a robe with a pot of tea. He was also so lost in thought he hadn't noticed her until she closed the door, which is when his head snapped towards her. What happened? Masaru asked, cutting straight to the point, having become quite concerned at the sight of his quiet, trembling spitfire of a wife crying in the doorway. Something that was so out of character for her that it was probably a scary thing for him. Mitsuki's mouth opened a few times, but it took a full minute for her to find words. Izuku is in the goddamn hospital. Some motherfucking cocksucking bigots attacked him on the way home from that shitty school yesterday, Mitsuki told him, surprised she could keep herself from yelling as she explained. Masaru hadn't needed any more explanation. He understood her source of distress, and quickly crossed the room to put his hands on her shoulders to help ground her. Mitsuki felt the anger dissipate slightly as she was reminded of how good of a partner Masaru was. Masaru was always sweet but straightforward in the way she needed. "Is he going to be okay?" Masaru asked, gently rubbing circles in her shoulders. "He's stable right now, but he was in bad shape. Ain't going to get out of the hospital for a while, and then he'll need rehabilitation therapy or some shit, Masa." Mitsuki answered, wiping away tears. Masaru was about to say something when Katsuki groggily stomped into the living room, rubbing his eyes. "It's 4 in the fucking morning. The fuck are you geezers doing?" Katsuki hissed, glaring at them. A new wave of anger and guilt overwhelmed Mitsuki when she saw the boy, the urge to scream profanity at the boy for sleeping so damn soundly after putting little Izu in the hospital. It was only held back through clenched Katsuki, Masaru said in a warning tone, shooting the boy a look. Katsuki and rolled his eyes. Christ, old man, you sound like someone died or some bullshit. The boy complained, crossing his arms. Masaru was about to scold the boy, especially given his poor choice of words, but his wife spoke up first. Go to your room, she coldly hissed, barely above a whisper. The two blinked, shocked, both getting confused by her quiet outburst, especially Katsuki having never seen his mother like this. Why the fuck would I do that, hag? Katsuki shouted. Mitsuki turned and glared daggers at him. Bakugo Katsuki, go to your room now. You're grounded. Mitsuki hissed, her voice lowering to a tone Masaru had only heard his wife use a few times before. The harshness of it made Katsuki flinch back. He had never heard his mother speak like this ever. The fuck I am? I haven't done shit, he protested, but Mitsuki pushed away from Masaru and stomped straight up to the boy, and she practically snarled into his face. Go to your room now. Katsuki stared back up at her wide-eyed, finding he had been stripped of his voice in his shock, and it was unable to return under the sheer venom in Mitsuki's eyes. Katsuki hesitantly stepped back and then slowly walked away and retreated to his room without a word. Mitsuki had to stop herself from following her son to further give a piece of her mind, her fists clenched so tightly as they shook from her flaring anger. Mitsuki, Masaru meekly said, placing a hand on her shoulder, clearly concerned from that sudden act of aggression. Masaru had seen her blow up before, and had even had some of her fits directed at him, but Mitsuki had never once snapped at their son for being so careful before, having personally removed herself if she ever felt she was overwhelmed. Mitsuki could feel the anger die on her tongue upon seeing Masaru so confused, worried, and a little scared. She hated this, and the fact that she was the reason he was making that face, and that she had scared her son, made guilt and shame flood her body, cooling the rest of the excessive anger in her. Masa, we need to talk, Mitsuki told him, tears falling from her face, forcing her hands to unclench. Let's take care of your hands first, Masaru muttered, gently taking Mitsuki's wrists. Her fingernails had pierced her palms, and they were bleeding now. Okay, she whispered. Masaru disinfected the wound and bandaged Mitsuki's hands before they both sat down on the couch. Mitsuki needed a few minutes to collect herself before she explained everything she had learned about at the hospital from Inko. There was a very serious talk between the two that lasted until the sun rose. Hey guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. This is a second installment of Deku Sensei, so chapter 3 and 4, which hopefully you liked. I didn't get to talk much because I had to leave for and work that time. I was like literally pushing the envelope, not pushing the limit on what time I had left. But yeah. Either way, I hope you enjoyed this lovely series. It's slow. This is a very slow burn fic, so it will take like a good. I think if when I looked at the chapter summary, it was like, I think we didn't get into the start of the canon timeline until 100 plus. Yeah, I mean, yeah. Doesn't like we didn't do we didn't start the timeline until like 100 plus chapters in, but like it makes sense. I like a slow burn. I like a good slow burn, just so I can binge and just listen to however I want. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.